Alright. Again, we're back on. Let's see, let's do something.
You chatted with the feeling, you're staring at the ceiling. He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And the seven takes it to the pilot in a grave somewhere. By some, he's been called controversial. But we never seem to get too far. Well, if you think you're being taken, then you're ready to awaken to the truth of what we really are. Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show? My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something. We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. And as long as we stay passive, we'll come. He is the free American, Kling Douglas. With the naked truth and practice, all steps to pay our taxes, and that is why the bankers keep us down. Catch the Free America weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Learning public school, and did our fathers offer history, all fighting back for liberty, so we could play the tyrant fool. For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621. Venture, servitude, and slave, overburdened and bewildered, feudal name.
Alright, we'll try the second hour again. And who we're going to be listening to is Peter Kling. Now, I've got Peter up on Free American 6'9". I highly recommend you check it out. We're starting about 13 minutes into this recording.
They auctioned it off through a brokerage firm in Louisiana. I think it was New Orleans, just outside of New Orleans somewhere. It was in Louisiana, right here in the States. There was one bidder on Lucas oil. It was the Russian government. So they seized it, they sold it off, and they bought it. And now they've used those oil reserves that were under the Lucas oil, that they've now seized those. It's Gazprom, which is the largest publicly owned corporation in the world. Beyond ExxonMobil, beyond Microsoft, beyond Apple. It's the most publicly owned company in the world. They have a contract with China to ship all of that Siberian oil that they're pumping up from 40,000 feet, that hot magma oil, the kind that blew out in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, they're shipping as much that as they could. They set this agreement up a year ago, last September. It was the first time a major oil deal was cut outside of the petrodollar. In other words, let's say if Russia wanted to buy, or China wanted to buy oil from Russia under the what's supposed to be the system, or is now the old system, the China would have to go buy U.S. dollars, because you could only trade oil in U.S. dollars, Federal Reserve notes, and so they would have to go buy however many dollars worth of oil that they wanted to go buy, and then they would pay Russia in dollars, and Russia would then take the dollars and convert it however they needed to convert to get to where they wanted to go. Now, or actually September, a year ago, September 2012, the Chinese set up an agreement to buy all the oil Russia can supply them, and they are paying them in gold-backed yuan. Goodbye, American round-eye Federal Reserve note. Goodbye, a Rothschild banking system. Excuse my accent.
This is what they're doing with the BRICS. You may have heard of BRICS. That's Brazil, Iran, Russia, and China. They are setting up an alternative system to the Rothschilds. This is one of the things that really made the point here why I'm playing this video. This man makes incredible sense, and it gets better.
I'm in the moment.
Sure.
You know, and so you look at it from that perspective. We don't need you. We don't need your stinking Federal Reserve notes. Take them, put them on a roll, and stick them in your bathroom. Is pretty much what they said. Since then, several other countries have followed suit, including Australia, and you know, you have European nations now that they all found out that the NSA is spying on them. Germany, France, and the United Kingdom has said, screw you to the American dollar. We're not going to use you. So they abandoned the use of the dollar. Well, wait a minute. Wasn't the Federal Reserve printing up more of these darn things? Aren't they still printing up more of them? Yeah. Print more. Print more.
Well,
now,
I actually talked to somebody that worked at a Federal Reserve Bank as a vice president for several years, and I talked to him about the situation, and he thinks that they will just continue to print more, like you said, just add an extra zero at the end of the computer screen.
There's one problem that they've got, though. Now, I want to point something out. Putin has had a strong relationship with the Vatican. There are plenty of pictures of him with Pope John Paul II, Pope Ratzinger, and now Pope Francis, Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. There's a whole photo album with all the popes. As a matter of fact, last year at the G20 summit, when Putin came up with the idea, well, let's just take the chemical weapons away from Syria, it was reported that the Pope gave Putin a good pat on the head and an attaboy. Meanwhile, he basically symbolically slapped Obama in the face for wanting to go bomb Syria. Interesting. However, keep this in mind. I believe it was last November that Putin also visited the Vatican, if I recall correctly. But I know for a fact in April, that both the Obama and the Queen of England both got to meet the Pope back to back on Thursdays a week apart. First it was Obama that met the Pope. I forget the exact date. It was trying to remember the date, not important, but he met with the Pope a week later on a Thursday. The Queen meets with the Pope. Isn't that interesting? Meanwhile, we've got this situation in Ukraine. Now let's take a look at the players. You got Russia, Christian country. Ukraine, Christian country, both predominantly Eastern Orthodox. And then you've got all of the Western nations, all of the European Union, and all of the heads of state, all of the royalty of Europe are essentially in control of the Pope. Even the Queen of England, I know King Henry separated from the Church, King Henry VIII, but still, the Queen of England is a Dame of Malta, which makes her a subject to the Pope. So, all the European states ahead are subject to the Pope. The United States is still under the control of the Crown. Still under, as a matter of fact, it may come to a shock to some people, but our Social Security numbers are essentially our dog tags, and the Queen's the holder. All the money that we pay into the IRS goes to the Queen. She takes 40% and passes the rest on to the Vatican. Why do all roads lead to Rome? Well, they don't all lead there. You got to look at the player stuff. Now, here's a key point. We got, and I love this because this opened up a lot of things which are going on right now, and for some reason I was made aware of them. Around October 10th, 2010. There was a lot of New Age people posting things on my wall about 10-10-10, and I've never been into numerology or, religion of any sort for that matter, even though I am very knowledgeable within the Bible. We'll get into that a little bit later, because I'm going to change everybody's thought on the Bible. It isn't what you think it is. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in order to change the perspective, and I just lost my train of thought, which is absolutely terrible. Let's see. I will go back and reaffirm this. I'll tell you right now. I'm going to change everyone's perspective about the Bible, because we're going to get into prophecy here shortly.
Well, and that's what I need to talk to you about too, obviously, is you're really good with Bible prophecy and relating it to current events. So Ukraine, it seems like a lot of people are speculating that could lead to a bigger conflict, and
yeah,
is as you say, where the Rothschilds are losing some control in Ukraine because of Putin and their system of funds now. Let me ask you, a lot of people think that they're just two different sides of the same coin. Do you?
No. Well, no. They're the same side of the same coin.
Same side of the same coin.
Yeah, well, let me explain this, because this gets into the meat of the subject. Where did we get our current banking system from? Historically?
Why don't you tell our listeners?
It comes from the Knights Templar. Our current banking system, it comes from the Knights Templar. Matter of fact, they accepted gold. They created essentially the first ATM. They set up. Now, first, let's take a look at this historically. Here's this group. Now, for some reason, the Vatican thinks it's a great idea to go recapture the Holy Land. Now, remember, Rome, back when it was an empire, before it became a religion, just destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. General Titus came in and kicked everybody's butt. 2 million people were put to the sword. Titus caught them during Passover. So literally every Jew in the land was in Jerusalem. And he caught them there, laid siege to the city, starved them out for 3 months, and then he went in and razed the city to the ground and took 93,000 captives back to Rome, which fulfilled the biblical prophecy, by the way. A very important one. It was given first by the prophet Amos against Jerusalem, or the two-tribe city-state of Israel, back prior to the Babylonians coming in and destroying them around 600 BC. And then the disciple Stephen, in the book of Acts, quotes him while standing before the Sanhedrin. Now, this is important. What is the Sanhedrin? It is the Jewish high court. It is the religious high court. It's run by the priests and the scribes and Pharisees. So here you have the disciple Stephen standing there, and he says, quoting the prophet Amos, and Amos is speaking in the first person of Yahweh. He says, "Was it to me, O Israel, to whom you worshipped those 40 years in the wilderness?" This is when they first came out of Egypt, right, with Moses. He says, "No, it was to the tent of Molech and to the star of the god Raphan, to whom you made idols and offered sacrifices to. And for that I will send you far off beyond Babylon." Now, when they got shipped to Rome, it pretty much was far off beyond Babylon. Look up the Star of Raphan, or Molech, the Star of Molech. Raphan is spelled R-E-P-H-A-N, or sometimes R-U-M-P-H-A-N. Molech is M-O-L-O-E-C-H, or sometimes M-O-L-O-C-H. Molech it actually is a title. It means terrible god. Molech, the most famous one, is Baal. Baal required live child sacrifice. The first Molech was the Egyptian god Set, S-E-T. Set required live child sacrifice. Set was a homosexual or bisexual god, and he was a fertility god. And that same cult is still going on today. That's why 500,000 kids vanish off the planet every year. That's also why, I don't know if you know who Kevin Annett is, but he's been leading pretty much a charge against the Vatican and against the Anglican Church and against the Queen through the People's Court in Brussels. It's I forget the exact name of the court, but you can look this up. Kevin, Kevin, Annett. I believe the organization is icct.org, and he's done a tremendous amount of good for this and exposure. This all has to do with children disappearing at the hands of the church, both the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church, and it leads back to 50,000 children vanishing or dying while in the care of these are the First Nation children of Canada, the indigenous. Indian isn't a good word, but the American Canadians, if you want to call them that. 50,000 of their children died and vanished while in the care of the Catholic Church through parochial school systems. And 10 were seen, this was back in the 50s, were seen kissing the Queen's feet, Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, getting into a van, and they were never seen again. So they actually got a guilty verdict against Queen Elizabeth, against Pope Benedict, and now a child trafficking guilty verdict against Pope Francis. So the United Nations has now picked this up, and they're investigating the child abuse of the church perpetrated on the people of the world. So there's a lot coming out here. But here's an interesting thing. Let's go back to the Pope. The Pope seems to be still in control, large and in charge here. He's called everybody to his court, told them what he wanted to tell them, sent them back home. You got all Christian countries involved. For the last year, the Pope has been calling for the end of the debt system. He has said, it started a year ago in May, this month, that the debt system has been used as a tool to enslave the poor people of the world. In the beginning of July, he came out with a apostolic letter saying that they were going to extend the law or go after the law. They were going to go after criminals to the fullest extent of the law, is basically what that apostolic letter said. And then remember, they started cleaning their own house. People were being arrested out of the Vatican Bank. So people say, "Oh well, they're just going to clean up their bank." No, they're going to clean up all the banking systems. They're going to force a cleanup. Now you get to September, and the Pope comes out and he says that the debt system, he didn't use the word banksters, but essentially those controlling the money system who can no longer put "in God we trust" on their money, because they have made money their God and have used it as a tool to enslave the masses, and it has to end. October 3rd, he puts out a 41-page treatise on changing the current currency system around the world. And now you have Russia, who is a member of the BRICS countries, who don't need the petrodollar anymore. There's about 35 BRICS countries. BRICS stands for Brazil, predominantly Catholic country. India, they're kind of off the charts on the other side. Russia, very Christian country. And then China. And believe it or not, there's a lot of Christians in China. And something interesting, the Jesuits have a stranglehold on the banking system in China. So, be it as it may, the great dragon of China has a bit in its mouth, and it's controlled by the Jesuit banking system. Now, back to the Knights Templar. Here's the thing. Knights Templar come into power. They say, okay, let's go back and let's capture Jerusalem. They go back, they do that. They kill every man, woman, and child. Christian, Jew, Muslim, didn't matter. Killed everybody. Then they started digging. Wait a minute. How did they know there was something to dig for? Who were these Knights Templar? Look at the image. Their symbol. Oh, two poor knights on the same horse. They're so poor that they can't afford their own horses. Come on. Knights were from the nobility of Europe. Now, interestingly enough, 1,000 years before the Knights Templar come to power, somewhere thereabouts, pretty much all of the Molech worshippers of Jerusalem, those taken captive and then brought back to Rome, were free. They brought themselves out of slavery, which was the custom in that day. As a matter of fact, the oldest continuous Jewish settlement on the face of the planet is in Rome. It's like, instead of Little Italy, they have Little Jerusalem there. And it's been there since, I believe, 68 BC, maybe a little bit earlier. But it was set up as a trade city between Jerusalem and Rome, and it's been there ever since. So, talk about standing the test of time. So they had a lot of connections there. And in the 1,000 years that they were there, you can be pretty sure that the nobility that came out of Jerusalem did their best to climb their way to the hierarchy of Europe. And indeed, that's the case when you start looking at the different family trees. And then you find, yes, indeed, the nobility of Europe is married into a Jewish line, although maybe not an authentic Jewish line totally, because it's been controlled by the Khazars, essentially. The Rothschild cabal, which married into, well, that's a whole other show. Let's leave that as a thing. But so here you've got everybody that's being essentially controlled by the Vatican, and the Pope is calling for a change in the monetary system. So now you put the BRICS countries up against the Federal Reserve Note and the European Union, and you let them have a tug-of-war using Ukraine as the leverage, and watch the American dollar crumble.
So they are using this as a systematic approach to destroy the petrodollar, and if that is the case, and if they're all working together, then what happens next for the American currency and the American people?
We're going to see, well, take a look at what's happened in Europe, Italy, especially Cyprus, Greece, Spain, Portugal. All of these countries had resets, but Cyprus was probably the one that made the best news. I think people with X amount of dollars, whatever they sent the level at, they were going to lose 40% of it. Oh, thank you. You are now a stockholder in the bank, and thank you for your contribution and your forced shares. Russia was involved in this. Russia wasn't too thrilled. They had something like $68 million invested in banks in Cyprus that they were looking at losing 40% of. And they turned around and pulled out as much as they could before it all hit the fan. But the problem was, it still went through. So now, if you're sitting back with a 401k, think that you've retired and that you don't have to worry about anything. I've got $250,000 in my 401k. No, you may have about 40% to 50%, maybe if you're lucky 60% of that when this is all over, if they don't push it beyond that. Because the goal is to have at least, it's to revamp the whole world currency system. So to change it all around, to get rid of the debt system. Now on the upside of this, hey, you own a house and you're in debt to your eyeballs, and you got a $200,000 mortgage and you don't know how you're going to pay it. Well, if they end the debt system, guess what? What debt do you owe?
So in that case, though, wouldn't it be more likely that the government would just take ownership and maybe let you stay there under certain requirements and conditions?
No, that's what they did in Russia when the Bolsheviks came into play. Congratulations, you can still live here. But it's no longer your farm. It's the people's farm, and you can still farm it, but you must give the food to the people. Oh, okay. Is that like that bill that Obama signed that, essentially says anything that we own, the government can use in a time of crisis?
The peacetime martial law bill that was put into play 2011?
Yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, the government can come in, and they say, well, we got troops down the road, we're running out of supplies, what you have to eat?
I think they renamed it the Strategic Relocation Act, actually, is what they renamed it afterwards, because there was some outcry about that.
Yeah, they can name it whatever they want, cover it over however they want. The bottom line is it's another way to control us. When we accepted the Patriot Act, that was the end of America. That was it. Every person that let that go through should just smack themselves, because that was the official signing of the admittance that Americans pissed themselves because we were attacked, or so we were led to believe.
And let's bring in the Bible prophecy to 2001 for a second, and the Twin Towers that were taken out. Was that used as an occult ritual to usher in this new monetary system that they're attempting to do, as you say?
Well, they don't do anything just for one reason. And if you look at the World Trade Center, there was several reasons that became a target. It was built as a symbol. Typically when you draw a dollar sign, you draw an S and then put two lines through it, right? The symbol of the two lines were the World Trade Center, and the S is symbolic of a snake or a serpent. So that's originally what it stood for. Now, there were some problems there. The World Trade Center was full of asbestos. It was going to cost them over $1 billion to abate the asbestos out of there. Interestingly enough, there was a lot of government government offices there, including the CIA and the FBI, and a ton of other investment companies there, including an investment company that held a significant amount of bonds that the Bush family had coming due. So there's another aspect there. And then you've got the trading hands where the World Trade Center actually sold before the 9/11 event. I believe it sold in the late 1990s. And the new buyer had basically a double indemnity clause on the towers, that there were two different attacks, and he got double the reparation for the cost of the towers. Interestingly enough, that the same owner was the person that was developing the land for the 2012 Olympics in England. So, there were just so many connections. And then when you go back, was it 2 days before the World Trade Center was hit by these airplanes? Donald Rumsfeld's on a hot seat before Congress, and Congress wants to know where the Pentagon lost $4.4 trillion. Oh, well, isn't it a coincidence that Pentagon got hit right in accounting, and there's no record of what happened to that money now? Now that Congress wanted to know where $8.8 trillion vanished to. Congress doesn't have any words. I mean, the Pentagon doesn't have any answer for that yet. So, where's the money going to? What's happening to this? So much that's going on behind the scenes that the average person doesn't have a clue of. Absolutely no clue of. Nor what is actually going on an interdimensional or on an extraterrestrial level. Yeah, ET's involved. How about that? You don't believe me? Hey, let me tell you something. We've already had disclosure. We have already had disclosure. Go on YouTube, type in Truman, aliens, UFOs, and more than likely you can find the black and white movie or trailer that was taken where Truman's saying, oh yeah, we talk about aliens and yeah, UFOs all the time. No big deal. We know they're here. That was disclosure. What was that, 1948, 1949? Eisenhower didn't want to have anything to do with them. So they kind of got swept under the CIA rug. And MI5 was supposed to be handling it out of Europe. So, that's all the little stories that go on behind the scenes. But let's take a look at, you don't think that they're here? Just look at agencies like MUFON and how many reports they have. Look at all the people that have come forth out of the military complex and have told us they're here. Interesting one actually touched my life in a literal way. Stanley Fulham, unfortunately, may God rest his soul, he's passed, but he wrote a book, Challenges of Change. Major Fulham retired from NORAD, and he wrote that book. That book is what the aliens told him was going to happen, and that time is folding, guess when? Right now. 2014, 2015.
Your wife made contact with an extraterrestrial?
I'm sorry?
Did you say your wife made contact with an extraterrestrial?
No. I think that's the wrong part of space for the exes that I had. But anyway, no. Stanley Fulham, Major Stanley Fulham, Fulham. He's a retired major from NORAD, and he wrote the book Challenges of Change. And in Challenges of Change, he has a timeline that aliens gave him. Now, here's an interesting thing of future events that we're going to have to go through a pretty dismal time, but no, don't worry, they're going to come and help us out of it all, is the primary thrust. The interesting dates that he gave all of a sudden correlated with what I found from the research that I started doing back in October 2010. And now biblical dates are corresponding with alien dates. Come on, what's going on here?
And we had the opportunity to speak with Kathleen Martin. She's an international investigator for MUFON, head of it actually, and she was talking about many cases of different races. So what races are actually fighting the American people, or I shouldn't say the American people, but what species or what race is actually infiltrated the Earth and is causing all of this, chaos and destruction with things like Fukushima and the GMOs, the forced mercury vaccines of children, etc.?
Well, pick a race, doesn't matter. I say that flippantly. They could tell us whatever they want to tell us. How would we know? How do you substantiate that Gorak is from the Pleiades? How do you substantiate that you had, I had contact shortly after I was 18. My birthday's in April. I had contact in May. It's a wild situation. It went on for about 5 nights over the course of 10 days. And I can't tell you whether it was lucid dreaming, I don't think I was actually transported anywhere, but I wasn't transported to a ship. I was transported underground. And
would you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I was living in North Carolina. Interestingly enough, the mountains of North Carolina are a hot spot for a lot of strange anomalies. And I was asleep in my room, and something appeared in my room and woke me up out of a dead sleep and said, "Look, the prince arrived." And I popped up, and I could see this thing there, and I literally ran through it, not even thinking about it, because I could see these flashing lights outside my window. And when I look, I see this landing craft, which can only be described, as Eric von Daniken would say, the chariot of the gods was landing. It was golden, and there were lights underneath this thing. It was a golden chariot with golden horses molded in, and it was landing. And it was like, steam or mist coming out from underneath it, and I could see that there was a person. I was like driving it, and he had a crown, and he had a beard, dark. And it landed on the other side of the house. And when I ran around to the other side of the house, it wasn't there. And nothing was in my room. You want to talk about somebody who was like, what happened? Now, this has a direct correlation when you go back to the only way you can start to explain my life is to go prior to when I was born, and I'm not saying, oh, I'm the Messiah or anything like that. But when you look at biblical scripture, it says that the angelic forces are leading the work. And by happenstance, you have to put both my parents together and look at their history and an event that started in my mother's life before she even knew my father. And then you look at my father's side, and it's interesting. My father's grandmother, her family, all emigrated to Germany from France. They were French Huguenots, and they left because of persecution. When you go down that line, you find that they were among the first to speak out against the church. My ancestors could have very well have been burned at the stake by the Catholic Church. And here I am 1,000 years later speaking out against the Catholic Church. Is that by coincidence? No, there are no coincidences in life. We know that. So how did I get to this point? Interestingly enough, I had some very interesting people start studying the Bible, more so with my mother, but I was always there. And I learned not religion, I learned exopolitics. The political events between Earth and interdimensional forces. I didn't learn that there was little green men. I learned that there were interdimensionals, life forms that can travel between dimensions. What I couldn't understand is what were dimensions. I understood that we lived in a three-dimensional world. Now I was only 5 years old when it started. Actually 4. And I could understand that. You know, we lived in dimensions, and you know, depth, width, height, and there was time. Well, time kind of went tick, 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 and one day, but there was more, and so you know, it's like, well, what's the fifth dimension? And I don't mean the rock group because they were there too, but you know, where did the fifth dimension take us? And we couldn't have figured this out until we came up with string theory. Wow! And then string theory string theory, just in brief, says this: all matter vibrates by little tiny little pieces of particles of energy that look like strings, and they vibrate the same way as a string on a guitar, a string on a piano, or a harp. They all vibrate to a set tone or a set speed, and that's what the atomic structure is made out of. Now, at the atomic structure, an atom is, at its core, is made up of all these little strings all humming in harmony, and that's what makes water liquid. You know, that's what gives hydrogen its properties, oxygen its properties, gold its properties. It all depends on the arrangement of the molecules and the speed at which that string is vibrating at. Now, what it also tells us is that in order for our three-dimensional world to exist as we know it, there needs to be at least 7 other dimensions for a total of 10 dimensions, including the dimension of time. Now, most people know Dr. Michio Kaku. Some people call him a New World Order shill. Some people call him a brilliant man. I met him in person, gave him my book, Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. I proposed to him, Dr. Kaku, with all these dimensions, could it be that God is the universe in which we live, or the multiverse in which we live? And he said to me, well, philosophy's down the hall if you want to talk about God. You know, when you look at the multiverse, and he said, yes, I'd be happy to read your book. And he took it, and I gave one to the producers of his show. I was a guest on his show. In the audience, he didn't actually interview me. Shucks. But anyway, a year later on his show, Sci-Fi Science, he proposed that the universe is alive. And indeed, could it be God? Oh, what happened, Doctor? Did you go down the hallway to philosophy? Thank you for reading my book, Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon. Change that man's view. But here's the thing. We live in a 10-dimensional multiverse. We couldn't have understood this until when? Until the 1990s, the late 80s, throughout the 1990s. First they developed string theory. Then they developed M theory, which was membrane theory, which essentially said that our 7 dimensions exist within these membranes, which are all dimensions which can really go on forever. And it's when these 2 membranes touch that it sets off the Big Bang, and it's like lightning bolts going throughout the whole 7 dimensions, setting off life and creating planets and gaseous clouds and different other things that we're observing in our universe. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you go to superstring theory, and superstring theory says, you know, it can go on indefinitely. It never has to stop. And here's something else that's interesting. So, here's a part of the Bible we couldn't have understood until we understood string theory. Now, interesting, let's go just back to the basics before we go into infinity and beyond. Let's go back to the basics. 10 dimensions. Now, the math says that if those 7 dimensions aren't there, we don't exist. But the math also says those 7 dimensions can do fine without us. Dr. Mikio Kaku said, well, they kind of think of it this way. You can be sitting back in your living room watching TV right now, and in another dimension, a T-Rex could be running right through your living room, and you would never know it, because it was just slightly outside of our dimension, and so you wouldn't have experienced it. And when he said that, I thought, you mean we could be running through God's living room right now and we'd never know it because we're in another dimension? Yeah, how about that? Now, does that mean there are other life forms besides humans? Well, yeah, we're told that there are aliens, extraterrestrials. Who are they really? What existed in the other 7 dimensions? How long did those other 7 dimensions exist before our 3 all of a sudden decided to appear somewhere around, 15 billion years ago? Now, here's something interesting. When they do the calculations and they look at this lightning storm that goes off across the dimensions when 2 of these membranes touch, they estimate it takes about 1 trillion years. Let's see. The Big Bang happened 15 billion. We're good for another 985 billion years to go. No wonder all the dark matter is expanding the universe at an accelerated rate. Yahweh, God, is growing up.
All right. We're going to end it on that one. If you want to keep hearing this type of shows, getting this information, I don't create all of it, but I choose it and I share it with you. I urge you to get this issue of the Free American for $2.99. I urge you to go to freeamerican.com, do that, make a donation, and check out shop.freeamerican.com to get any of my magazines, any of my books, any of my films. I am Clay Douglas. I am the Free American. And I do try to, be fair with my guests, not always agree with them. But I do care about this country. I do care about you. I do care about your children. And I want you to be able to live a happy, productive, peaceful life. It's why I do this show. It's why I started the Free American. It's why I do the magazine. We're just about out of time. My phone number, by the way, is up on every page, any of my pages. You can even find it on Facebook. Most people hide theirs. I don't. I don't hide from anyone. Like to hear you, like to hear from you, you can write me at clay@freeamerican.com. I've redone the website, so you can go to Free American, click on my Facebook page and find this, and I only played you a part of this. There's a lot more to this Peter Kling, and I will have him on. I have guest booked for the next 2 weeks up until June. So we're going to have somebody new every morning. Again, I'm not choosing these guests because they echo me.
Mainstream media won't tell you. At Truth Radio, you can listen live or listen to a large selection of archived programs. TruthRadio.com. The truth is out